Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the podcast Strikes Back. My name is George and you're listening to our spoiler review of Doctor Sleep with the boys Connor and Benny.
Hello there.
Connor didn't have his mic set up correctly, and then he
First
realized
time.
halfway through the intro that he didn't have his mic correctly
I was about to
set
just
up.
start talking into thin air like a normal human being.
Yeah.
I realized
you know that's not the way things go.
you
around
fine
here.
folk wouldn't be able to hear me.
Welcome to our spoiler review for Doctor Sleep. This has been out for a couple of weeks now, so we thought, hey, why don't we just get into the meat and potatoes of it? For all of you who have seen it, this is the sequel to 1980s The Shining, and obviously the book before that by Stephen King. Quite one of my favorite films. I've never read the book, but an absolute favorite of mine in the horror genre. And this Doctor Sleep is the sequel based on the book, but director Mike Flanagan of Haunting of Hill House has come in and done a sort of a hybrid approach, taking elements of the book and Stephen King's Shining, and Stanley Kubrick's Shining, which is vastly different from the book, and fusing them together to create something of its own. I was very excited going into this, but let's kind of get into that. Let's talk about how everyone was feeling going in before seeing this film. Benny, what's your relationship like with the original Shining and Mike Flanagan? And were you excited for this property?
I think like any burgeoning film fan in their teens, I had a massive Kubrick phase, and Shining was one I very distinctly remember watching on SBS, I think Australian channel, late at night one night, and being pretty scared by it because I did not delve into a lot of scary stuff back then, and that movie gets quite trippy towards the end. So it definitely stuck with me a bit. And then I didn't revisit it for a long time. I actually ended up watching it a couple of months ago with a friend who'd never seen it, and was really able to appreciate how beautifully constructed that film is and how effective it is, even though nowadays I don't find it to be scary necessarily in any way. It really was a beautiful and striking film. And then, of course, there's Mike Flanagan, the patron saint of the podcast, someone who we will not stop plugging all the time. I feel like I only just discovered him about a year ago or last year. This guy's just been toiling away, creating really solid movie after really solid movie with the occasional just like terrific film. So that was enough to get me interested in this. Apparently the book Doctor Sleep, the very belated sequel to Stephen King's The Shining, was not good at all. So what they were trying to do with this, make a sequel to both versions of The Shining after 40 years, seems like a terrible idea. But Mike Flanagan is one of those few guys who I'm just like, I don't really care what he's doing. I'm going to show up for it. The trailers I didn't like the look of particularly, but that was it. Mike Flanagan, that'll get me in there.
Oh, you can't.
Yeah, look, The Shining I watched late enough in life that it was not scary. And I didn't hold any huge love for it. You know, I don't think that in my younger years I was enough of a fan of, film to really kind of appreciate what a film it was. So, for most of my life, The Shining, take it or leave it type mentality. When this project was announced, I was kind of neither here nor there with it. It had Mike Flanagan, who I've got a lot of faith in, and his ability to create interesting stories and characters. It had Ewan McGregor, who I consistently enjoy. The concept or the trailers, I was kind of neither here nor there with them. They weren't bad, but they weren't particularly interesting. And this whole kind of menacing threat of this group that was trying to steal, The Shining, I wasn't sure how they were really going to mix that into the story, and it didn't really feel menacing enough. Like, The Shining, while it wasn't really scary, it had this atmospheric kind of pressure about it, and it built up tension, and the villain, so to speak, wasn't really tangible up right until the end where it manifest. Whereas this one seemed as though it was going to be a little bit more traditional in its approach of just having, a set of villains that were, chasing the protagonist, which again, I wasn't crazy about. But again, my faith in the director and my like of the main cast member was enough to get me to put my bum in the seat.
Yeah, nice. Well, unlike you, Connor, I'm a massive fan of The Shining. Have been since I first saw it. It must have been similar time when you saw it, Benny, 15, 16 years old. And it definitely stuck with me. And it's one I watch every 4 or 5 years. The prospect of having a sequel to that seemed so ridiculous, unnecessary, and insert another adjective in there that's sort of just
Disrespectful.
disrespectful. There we go, baby.
Borderline, wasn't it? Yeah.
I just really wasn't sold on whether or not this is a good idea. And if it's in a book form, fine, that's all well and good. But once it comes to the cinema, I have to pay attention. I have to know what goes on. And I just didn't think there was really enough there. But as you said, Benny, with Mike Flanagan getting involved, that really piqued my interest. So, yeah, trailers were fine. I've never seen
You
a Mike
hated that
Flanagan.
first one. Come on.
I've never seen a Mike Flanagan trailer that's really nailed it, I don't think. I just don't think he's that kind of filmmaker. And this one, I was sort of like, let's see how this goes. So we've seen the film. Let's get into the review itself. This is full spoilers, guys, once again. So if you haven't seen it and you don't want anything's ruined, get on out of here. I think something that I noticed straight away was they recast key characters in the flashbacks and whatnot. You got little Danny, you got the mom, Jack Nicholson's character, the Shine guy, in the bedroom at the beginning there. That was a ballsy move, and I was really glad they didn't face replace anybody. And it didn't, them not being the same actor. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I don't get who they are. They got the mannerism spot on. They got the costume spot on.
And the look as well.
Yeah,
And that
everything
was
was
what weirded
perfect.
me out. Like, not in a bad way, but I was just kind of like, huh. Because the mom actor in particular looked pretty close, at least from memory.
Like a more kind of Hollywood version.
Yeah.
Definitely. But then the way she acted it was so spot on.
Yeah. And
to
I was
Shelley
like, I
Duvall.
didn't even actually notice it with the mom initially. But I thought but it was necessary as well to kind of place this as its own film. And I think this is representative in the rest of the film as well, as this kind of towing the line between being its own thing and being a sequel to The Shining. And I think that, particularly with the intro, it kind of tries to make that statement. It's almost trying to, have its cake and eat it too, in the sense of it saying we're our own thing. We can kind of exist outside the initial Shining, but also we are very much a sequel to both the film and the book.
Yeah, I think the first thing I said on the way out was how impressed I was with how bold they were in just saying, we're doing a sequel to The Shining. There are certain things we're going to have to just do.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to have to take one of cinema's most notorious characters, Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, and just put a different actor in the role because we need him to show up at the end for this to be kind of coherent in any kind of thematic way. And I love that they just went ahead with it all the way through, and I love that they kind of ease you into it by recasting everyone at the beginning, and then just completely remaking full scenes from the original. Iconic scenes. And I think it was so odd after such, this de-aging thing and digital face replacement is such a new thing. It was so odd for me to already be so impressed by people not doing that.
Yeah.
I was like, that's so refreshing seeing them just say
It's
you
people.
just treat it
But
like a
it's-
play and just be like,
it's-
yeah, we're
yeah.
just gonna recast
And,
these.
and there's no disconnect. It's not like the audience member. I'm like, who is this? It's not the same person. You follow along. You enjoy it more, if anything.
I found it very particularly interesting because they changed the characters, but they did it like shot for shot from the movie, which puts you in this frame of mind, which is this is definitely a sequel to the movie, but it is not a sequel to the movie.
No, story-wise, thematically, it is so much more a sequel to the original novel, which I also haven't read.
Yeah, and I know we kind of just almost kind of keep repeating ourselves, but it's just that really fine line that they walked, and it for me, they pulled it off.
Yeah,
I think it was
totally agree.
really well done.
Yeah, and I, you said we keep repeating ourselves, but I just don't think it can be overstated that that's a ridiculous thing to have achieved.
Yeah,
To have made a sequel to two very different versions of the same thing that I feel like satisfies both.
yeah.
That's nuts.
I think that's really spectacular. Can I tell you the moment that I thought that this was going to be a really good film? The moment that I kind of like strapped in and was like, right, gotcha. It was after his little talk with the guy on the bench, and he hears the woman in the bathtub, and he looks at the woman because that was quite an intense scene before that. You know, him wetting himself and that kind of, like you got the sense of like, oh, there's a bit of horror in this. Okay, nice. His going into that bathroom and closing the door with that scene, just that shot down the corridor and that confidence that kid portrayed, that for me, when he closed that door, was like, I'm 100% in. I have complete and utter faith from here on in. And I thought that was so spectacularly done. He just comes back out and says, yeah, mama, it's all good.
Fantastic moment and a very clear indication that this is not just going to be rehashing the first one. This is going to be moving the story forward beyond that.
Yeah, I really, to your point, it's rehashing some of these scenes that are quite sacred. You know, it could have come off not the best, and he handled it with elegance and respect, while still adding a few extra little ingredients, because we didn't really see Danny do that in the first movie.
No.
You know, he's quite a he's just the kid, and he has a few really iconic lines, but he doesn't really do that much. And in this one, he's actively like really sort of putting a very strong foot forward with the characterization, and it's sort of like, okay, wow, okay, we're already adding to, and not in a bad way, you know, adding in a depth manner, not just more shit on top. So I totally agree with you. That was a really great scene. This whole world building and expansion of the characters and
The Shining.
The Shining, with Rose the Hat and all these sort of energy vampires. I thought that was really, really fantastically handled, and
Good intro
you know,
with them
if you-
going after that girl.
If you read that on, like Wikipedia, you know, like you know, this doesn't read well.
No, it doesn't. And then the energy vampire came, and you're like, ooh.
And I've heard from people who've read the book that gang is completely inept, almost laughable. Like they're terrible villains.
Right.
Yeah, but in the movie, I think they're brilliant.
You feel as though there is danger.
Yeah.
Like
Like
you also feel their plight.
Yeah,
As well.
totally.
They are, and that's what's the best kind of villain is when they're three-dimensional. And I really felt that with these guys.
Yeah, they're fascinating. There's a scene in particular where the oldest among them is dying, and she's kind of recounting elements of his life to him, and it's so evocative. It's like, who was this guy? What has he done? Like, he's led empires, and how long has he been around? Just one of those cool little, you know, one or a few lines of dialogue that make you think of so much.
It just it opens it up without the mystery still there. Like, it's a very effective way to open things up in the world, leaving it to your imagination and not necessarily just presenting it on a silver platter for you. It's like alluding to things.
Yeah, and on that note, as a whole, I think this movie does such an interesting job of kind of reclarifying things we saw and were introduced to in the first film, and contextualizing them more, because the first film is almost abstract in the way it presents things like The Shining and what's actually happening in this situation. I don't think anyone would come out of that movie for the first time and have like a very succinct description of the plot, or
Yes.
at least not the way it appears in the book.
Or at least
Of
the
course, they're different things.
significance of Danny's character.
Totally, yeah. And this movie really reframes all of that and really gets into specifics, about what The Shining is and what it means and who these characters are, what the Overlook is and why it happened to Danny and his family. And all of that sounds so sacrilegious to just saying that this is what that movie does. It sounds stupid. The fact that they would bring in elements of the original book that weren't explicit in the film, but make a sequel to that film while throwing that all in, it just shouldn't work in any way.
But it does.
But it actually deepens my appreciation for the original film, both as its own thing and as part of this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean.
Mm.
Can we talk about the development of Danny Torres or Ewan McGregor's character? There's a big gap between when you see him as a kid, supposedly all right, and when you see him as a kind of drunk degenerate. And
And there's another jump as well.
Well, yeah. But like that jump in particular, I feel like there's a lot that was unsaid, but that the audience would have been obviously able to fill. And that was really economical storytelling. You're like, oh, I definitely get why he's fucked up. You can see like where the downward slide of his world would have, just like where he went wrong.
Yeah, and we take a quick detour in 2011 to see his rock bottom, and it's horrific. It is so horrible. He ends up allowing to die, a young mother and her baby, who we see as like undead spirits. And it's
I thought that was
horrible.
particularly intense.
Yeah.
Like
I think it set the scene really well.
for particularly how rock bottom it was. Although while maintaining a certain air of the character's not dignity but inner good in that very pivotal scene where he doesn't take her money, and kind of establishes this broken person with, no, I won't say a heart of gold because that seems a little bit too cliche, but it maintains some kind of ability to like the character.
Yeah.
While
Like,
also
this is a good man who's lived a horrific life.
Yeah, and which makes that kind of catharsis and that him becoming good that much more kind of satisfying in a short term sense of kind of way.
Yeah. There's an arc that can be formed from that.
Yeah, but it also establishes that this is not really it's not just Danny Torres's film, because in my mind, him being like when there's that jump to him being all sober and that, I'm kind of like, all right, that would have been presumably the interesting kind of how does he defeat alcoholism, but we've just skipped that, right?
Yes.
So I think that there could have been an interesting arc about how he delves into alcoholism.
That is an interesting creative choice, isn't it?
Yeah, there's an interesting arc of how he gets better, but they've just like no montages, nothing, which I really appreciated. Economical, straight into it. And they also skipped over the his relationship building with this teenage girl, which I thought, again, really economical.
You just get it.
Yep.
He's able to make these relationships feel very natural. It's not, I don't know how to say it. Like Mike Flanagan, I think one of his biggest strengths in Haunting of Hill House was to get those family dynamics feeling very real, tangible, authentic.
And to the point where you could know in advance how any given character in this or that would react to any other given character in a meeting. Like they're so well defined as people.
Do you know what, to Flanagan's credit, and this has, I think, 100% to do with the writing of this, there's a scene where she catches a bus, the little girl catches a bus to Danny Torrance, and he kind of takes her aside to a park bench, and the first thing he says is, do you know how bad this looks? Like a grown man sitting with a teenage girl. Which is the first thought that popped into my head.
Yeah.
And I was like, for the character to kind of echo what the audience is obviously thinking and what someone in real life would probably say as like a point of concern, makes the characters feel just more real.
Absolutely.
In a movie about energy vampires and The Shining.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I thought really excellent, just little intuitive piece of dialogue.
Yeah, so I love the way he played with the alcoholism theme and just the kind of substance abuse stuff in general. Like you've got these ravenous villain characters who are all just so addicted to this shining that they are literally torturing children to get it.
Yeah.
That's a harrowing scene.
Yeah, that is intense.
One that really sticks out for me.
The kid from Good Boys, that was hard to watch. I don't know. I love the way that all kind of just played around the whole movie, and then when we get to the end, the interaction between him and his father, and his eventual fate, I thought was really satisfying.
Yeah.
Which is so hard to do because, as we already mentioned, they've recast one of Jack Nicholson's most iconic roles.
Yeah.
And it's Henry Thomas, the kid from E.T.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he was also the dad in Haunting of Hill House, which should be more distracting than it was. I don't know. It was really well done.
He was the only one, the recast one, that I thought they had actually face replaced him and it looked fucked up.
That's so
Like
interesting.
I couldn't. Sometimes you see and you're like, that's CG and it's not CG.
Yeah.
I was
'cause
having
you're
one of
expecting
those.
it.
I was having, and I think the background was green screen to match the Kubrick. So I was just wigging out on that, and then you told me that no, that's an actual person. I
That's
was
a
like,
man.
what the hell? I thought I knew movies.
Yeah. No, that was really well done.
But it kind of undermines something really interesting about the first Shining was the date. Like I guess there's this idea that these beings are ever existing, but how does that final image of the Shining tie into this? I don't think they ever really did. They address that?
No
I don't
idea.
think they did. But just something that I was like, oh God, yeah.
Although
got my eye on you, Flanagan.
Jack Torrance does outright deny that's who he is. He says he's the bartender.
Yeah.
So I guess it kind of does play into like the hotel just claimed his soul for eternity. I don't know. It's interesting stuff. I guess you could delve into that as much as you wanted to.
There's an easy out like that. I mean, I don't think
Yeah.
that needs to be addressed really.
For sure.
I thought there was some really cool visual styling in this. Some of the more esoteric stuff, like the
Rose the
shining,
Hat. Oh, sorry, you go ahead.
like traveling across the country
Yeah.
and going through mines and stuff. I thought that was all so well executed. Like it wasn't too over the top. It really wasn't like overly visual effecty or anything. It was just perfect.
Yeah. And looked good.
Mm.
Like not only in like a visual styling sense, like, the kind of the mechanics of it, but just the fact that it looked really good.
Really polished.
Yeah.
And
I
created
thought,
some
fuck yeah.
intense moments, like when the little girl turns around, she doesn't have eyes. She's got
Yeah.
that weird new hair, and she just becomes like she's almost the villain in that scene. It's really you're scared for the other
This
character.
is a really
that-
interesting thing, right? Throughout this entire thing, they talk about the inner darkness. Like, I think someone mentions that to the little girl that, like, you're not that different from us. Like, you've got that kind of sickness in you. And you can tell in that very harrowing scene of her degloving her hand, which they just fucking outright showed.
That's fucking intense.
And I was like, oh my God, this is like,
It's going to be like
so
Flanagan's
excessive.
thing now, I think.
so scary.
But there was this moment where you're like, fuck, this girl's like a bit sadistic because she seems to be enjoying this. And it almost kind of made me think, how are they going to like make the Rose the Hat scary again? Right? Like, how are they going to make her a formidable bad guy? Which I think they did quite effectively.
Yeah. I mean, the way they killed all of the other ones, it's like, fuck, she's a real loose cannon now. Like
Yeah.
if she was before.
Yeah.
I thought going back to the visual styling was, I think Mike Flanagan has a noticeable style that's present in all his films. And The Shining is so iconic, one of the first uses of Steadicam. And this one managed to wrangle and get it working between the two, kind of mirroring what he did with the story, but in just the look.
Yeah.
They were repeating scenes of the kid going around the corridors in the tricycle and stuff. He mirrored that perfectly, I thought, while still matching the Flanagan vibe that we're all used to.
And all like, to your point about it still feeling like a continuation on from the stylings of The Shining, because this seemed to follow characters like in that scene that you just mentioned, Ben, about Rose the Hat flying over that thing. The camera stays pretty much exact on her, like a Steadicam would, and everything else kind of just moves around, and it kind of gives this
Oh, it's Harry
similar
Potter
feeling.
or something.
Yeah, it gives a similar feeling to the initial, like the way that The Shining was shot. This felt like a lot of the same kind of camera motions, and nothing was too quick. Everything was kind of slow and purposeful and following a character. And I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
I thought the score was great.
Newman
Spot
Brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or yes, sure.
Newton
Newton,
Brothers. My bad. Who they've done a lot of work with Flanagan before.
Mm.
They did Haunting of Hill House. They did Ouija board, and I think maybe Gerald's Game.
Oculus. Yeah, they've done a lot with Flanagan.
Yeah, Gerald's Game as well.
Yeah, really cool when they brought in the original theme, but it was used very sparingly. In an
Perfect.
effective way, I thought.
Yeah.
And when they're going up the mountain mirroring the credit sequence from the first one,
Yeah.
that was fantastic. I really loved it. I think that's when the score cue came in.
Yeah, cool moment.
Just awesome, man. Just really awesome.
And booming as well. Like you're like, oh fuck. Like, and that's the kind of. I wish that movies did this more often, which is if you're going to use nostalgia, use it sparingly and use it correctly. Because that is a perfect example of it, right? Like that was kind of it is used in a way that makes sense for the story. It makes sense for the audience. And is not kind of overbearing or just being used for the sake of nostalgia. So yeah, I thought that was done really well.
Any negatives on this one? Would you say pacing was maybe a little long?
Yeah, I think the movie's a little overlong.
I think maybe
I
you could
didn't-
take out 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah,
But I didn't get my usual George freak out. Like I was like, this is purposeful.
Yeah.
And it's
That's what I kind of
working.
felt about it. And like The Shining is very similar in that. Like The Shining, you
Definitely.
could definitely kind of go like, all right, well, let's speed it up a little bit. And that's just Kubrick's style. I thought this was quicker than The Shining while maintaining that kind of purposeful moving forward feeling. And so, yeah, I didn't have an issue with the length at all. I was engaged all the way through.
Yeah, something else I said coming out of it was that it was so epic in scope. Just in terms of, like, you're only following a couple of characters to it, but it just feels like you go over like 39 years or something.
Yeah.
It feels huge, and you feel like you get whole lifetimes in it.
Which doesn't usually work in films, right? Like that's another thing that should have gone against this film. Like if you have big gaps in people's life, that can just kind of feel disorientating, where you're not feeling as though you're like there's a clear arc in a character in that. And this movie seemed to pull it off.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I did think it gets a little silly towards the end, but not in a hugely detrimental way.
No, it had like
It goes for it. It goes for it
Yeah.
more than you maybe has been set up in everything else in these Shining movies.
Yeah.
it feels as though it should have a little bit more of a kind of philosophical ending or something like that. Although they did set it up pretty consistently throughout the film to have that ending. The idea that he would unleash what's in the boxes, I figured was like almost inevitable. Like that was like, sure, that's going to happen. How did you guys feel about that final reveal of him, quote unquote, living, or him making it out of the fire, so to speak?
Great.
Yeah.
Well,
Did that feel almost like a little bit like a Hollywood ending?
I think it was just the natural, like that's where it was all going for me. I didn't feel like, he should have, not made it out or whatever.
He was dead.
Oh,
Yeah.
He was dead. Yeah.
Yeah. But all the souls in the hotel perished there, right? So that was what I meant. Like the whole idea was that place burnt down, and there was some risk of him not making it out.
Right.
So that was what I was saying. Like, did that feel a little bit too maybe convenient?
No, I thought it was really kind of.
I was good
beautiful.
either way. I was just curious. Like,
Yeah.
I noticed that could have been a criticism that some people had of that.
No, I thought it was perfect because there was the danger that they have this whole setup when they're going to kill a character and they don't. Like they did that, so I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, they did kill him.
Yeah,
that's
so they
really-
finished his story, and I thought it in a really satisfactory way. I loved the ending of him in that room with his mother, and then as a child again. That was really beautiful.
Yeah, that was awesome. Anything else that stood out to you about this film? I feel like we haven't given enough props to that the group of energy vampires, which, as we have said several times, is such a ridiculous idea, but was so brilliantly executed. Like, I mean, the introduction of them like recruiting that snake bite girl.
Yes.
Mm.
That was really, really intense.
Yeah. Whoever
Um,
her sidekick character is.
The male lead, yeah, he's from Fargo on TV. He was so great.
Shoot, what's his name? I just looked it up. Is that Cliff? No. Zan McLaren, Crow Daddy.
Hmm.
I thought he was really cool.
Yeah, when his one scene driving in the car when he's captured her,
Yeah.
and he's just talking about how all these people died for nothing.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah. I thought that was really great.
I just like how sort of cannibalistic they were.
Yeah, that was
They-
scary.
Oh, yeah. When
They
he's
were
doing his
just-
little.
They were just sort of surviving. They were drug addicts, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, they
Yeah.
were heroin addicts or whatever.
Yeah.
Can I also give props to Kylie Curran, who is the little girl in this, for that scene in particular where she's in the van, but she is playing Ewan, or they're
Danny.
playing Danny.
Yeah.
Which I thought really good props to her, because you can kind of, with kid actors, sometimes get a little bit of like a one track kind of style, or you don't often see a lot of kind of dynamic range. Whereas that kind of proved that she's got the ability to do it. I thought that was really cool, because I felt that was spot on.
I think, and also Ewan McGregor's accent, American accent, wasn't noticeably as distracting as it's been for me in the past.
I thought it was really
I don't
good.
think it was 100% there
I think this was my favorite performance of his,
in terms of an American speaking role.
just in terms of everything. I don't think I've ever liked him this much, except
Really?
for maybe you, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Come on,
'cause
Obi-Wan,
He's just,
baby.
but he's a meme.
Are you
so
not a fan of Trainspotting?
I haven't seen it in many years.
Okay.
Any final thoughts, guys? It's been overwhelmingly positive.
It has been.
This film is bombing at the box office.
Oh yeah, it's dying.
There's
I-
definitely not going to be Shining 3, Shining the
Probably,
Third.
thankfully. I mean,
Mm.
I walked out of this thinking this will probably almost certainly be in my top 10, if not in my top 5.
I want to get
which-
another viewing in.
Wow.
Yeah. Flanagan has once again proven himself more than capable of handling these kinds of properties. I'm so wildly impressed.
That's cool to hear. I'm glad to hear how much we liked it, but in particular, just how much I liked it, because the reception hasn't been unanimously positive.
Everybody's
and
talking about it.
The box office, of course, is terrible. But I just so thoroughly enjoyed this film, and this is one of the few cases where I've fallen in love with the director, and then the next film of theirs that comes out, I've actually really liked, because normally, like 9 out of 10 times, I'll start following a director, do all their back catalog, then the very next movie that comes
Sucks.
out, I'll be like, I didn't love that.
Yeah.
So this was very fulfilling.
Yeah. I think this to me reminds me a lot of 2049
Mm.
in the sense of like not wildly commercially successful. You'll definitely not get like a
Belated
A
sequel that
sequel.
never should have been made.
exactly. And yet
done.
came out of it was like, fuck yes.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, there we have it, guys. A worthy successor to the 1980 film as determined by the podcast Strikes Back. What did you guys think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section. And we'll be back next week for the weekly movie show. And one of these days we'll get our Irishman review out. One of
It's
these
3
years.
hours.
It's gonna
Fucking-
be 2
over
weeks
This
from
was
now.
2.5 hours.
It's gonna be 2 weeks from now. And it's just gonna be me reviewing it.
Yeah. You'd
It'll be
probably
on
like
Netflix
it more
by then,
that way,
right?
wouldn't you?
Yeah. It's gonna the review will also be 3.5 hours.
Anyways,
Well, I'll be tuning in. We'll see you then, Connor.
bye.
We'll see you then, Benny.
Bye.
You get that from me.